Where we last left off in my first read-through of Bleach, our heroes got into Las Noches and split up to try to find Orihime, which leaves them in the perfect spot to have some one-on-one fights with the Espada. Or, for now, mostly with people that used to be Espada. Silly me thinking we were going straight into Espada fights. No, we've got kind of a preliminary to get through, but that doesn't mean it's going to be easy by any means. So let's start with Ichigo wandering down the halls of the palace, and he's been followed by Nell. Her intentions for sticking with him seem pure enough. It seems like she just missed him, but also got separated from her family in the process. It was a really small moment, but Ichigo trying to remember Dondo Chaka's name and thinking of Don Kanonji was absolutely hilarious, by the way. And the laughs for these chapters didn't really end there. They're confronted by a very theatrical Arrancar named Dordoni, who might have one of the absolute best entrances in the series so far. He immediately fumbles, makes a fool of himself, and proclaims that he is Arrancar number 103, which seems a little underwhelming to Ichigo, but there's good reason for that. This is all a lesson to not judge a book by its cover. We quickly learn that Dordoni being ranked 103rd isn't evidence of weakness, it's actually evidence of his strength, and I love this subversion. The reader is kind of programmed at this point to think that an Arrancar with the number 103 probably isn't that special, but in reality we were warned that the numbers don't really designate power or rank until you get to the top 10 in the Espada, and in this case, 3-digit numbers are reserved for Arrancars that used to be Espada, so they are stronger than most of their brethren as we quickly learn. These are pretty much Espada level threats, even if they aren't listed in the top 10 anymore. I do have a question about this though. Is this what Grimmjow would have become if he didn't get his number back? Would he have been forced to get a new tat and join these guys? It seemed like he was just being used as an Espada lackey when he didn't have his number, instead of being shipped off to this part of the castle. Just something I'm curious about. Would he actually have become part of this former Espada group? Anyway, Dordoni proves to be much more capable than he originally seemed, but he's still a dramatic goofball, and I love him. He's got real flair. His habit of calling Ichigo Niño was just a small thing that goes from being degrading to actually kind of endearing by the end. And this whole fight is essentially about perception and pride, with Dordoni trying to goad Ichigo into showing his true power, first wanting to show him his Bankai, but then wanting to see his holification, even targeting Nell to try to force it out of him. Dordoni might be funny and a little hokey, but he is very serious when it comes to wanting to fight someone at their best. He's a threat, despite being very theatrical and despite being very, funny. He's still dangerous, and I love that about him. Ichigo would prefer not to use up the energy against someone that's not Espada, but he's willing to put all of that aside to protect Nell. That's just the way our boy is. When people he cares about are threatened, Ichigo will go to whatever lengths he needs to make sure that they're okay. And Ichigo also did this after Nell protected him against Dordoni, swallowing his Sero before spitting it back at him. Dordoni points out that Nell doing that isn't exactly a small feat, so my inclination that there could be something more to this little girl is definitely right. She's stronger than she looks, which really just helps highlight the continued theme of not judging people based off appearance or first impressions that this fight with Dordoni is trying to get across. So I hear you, Kubo. I'm gonna keep an eye on Nell. She's not exactly what she seems. She's more powerful than she looks. I gotcha. Ichigo finally obliges and puts on his hollow mask and instantly defeats Dordoni. Instantly. It was such a badass little moment, but he still has Nell heal Dordoni after the fight. Hilariously, by the way, with her drool, bile. I couldn't stop laughing at this whole bit because I don't know, I just keep liking Nell more and more, and she's hilarious, and these chapters have kind of lessened my suspicions of her being a secret villain. She seems like a well-meaning, free-spirited kid who also might have some real power. I also loved how sad and kind of beautifully pathetic Dordoni's motives were, that he wanted to beat Ichigo at his best to hopefully have Aizen give him his old position back. He knows that Aizen doesn't actually care about the Espada. He knows that they are just tools and weapons to be used, but Dordoni explains it so well when he says that once you see the sights at the summit, you can't forget the view. He just wants that feeling again, that feeling of being something, of having some sort of station and some sort of importance and purpose, and It's all just very sad. It's just very pitiful. And I really liked him trying to attack Ichigo the second after he was healed, even if he was immediately defeated again. It's just Dordoni showing Ichigo that he's not going to be able to show the Espada mercy or kindness. He shouldn't be healing them. He should be cutting them down without remorse, or he'll be killed for being soft. It's an interesting counterpoint to this kind of part of the Soul Society arc when Ichigo defeated Ikkaku and then had him healed. It shows that this isn't going to be like that was. Hueco Mundo and the creatures here are very different from the Soul Society. If Ichigo's going to survive, he might need to follow Dordoni's advice. Cast aside any sweetness and become a demon. And maybe Ichigo will almost have to do that literally, and lean into that side of himself, the white hollow Zangetsu inside. That's what a lot of this whole Arrancar arc has been about, is Ichigo understanding that other side of him, but knowing him, he'll find his own way. One where he won't have to completely lose himself to survive. At the end of this fight, we also see this Arrancar group with these bone masks come for Ichigo, but Dordoni holds them off. And this sacrifice moment came from such a place of respect, again showing that Hollows and Arrancars are actually very complex individuals, willing to die for what they believe in. I hope this really isn't the end for Dordoni, but if it is, you were great, Niño. And this group of masked individuals were interesting to meet because they also showed up later to clean up some messes in their own way. So I assume they're like the murderous janitors of Las Noches. Cool designs. I like this group. They're very intimidating. Now, getting into the fights with the other former Espada, Chad and Uryu each had to go up against one, and they weren't the most super thrilling fights of the series, and the two former Espada members didn't connect with me nearly as much as Dordoni, but I do love getting to see Uryu and Chad show off how far they've come. Uryu, like Ichigo, was also hoping to save his moves for bigger enemies, but he's forced to reveal a freaking lightsaber. At least that's how it seems at first, and it was awesome, but the payoff that this is actually still an arrow was fantastic. It's just super cool. You pull out a lightsaber, I'm sold. Love it. And it was interesting that this former Espada woman at least knew a little about Quincy, which was different than Iceringer, who hadn't heard of them. Maybe only the higher ranked Arrancars, like people who are Espada or were Espada, are aware of the Quincy. Or maybe this is just something with her backstory that wasn't revealed. I don't know. We didn't really get a chance to find out. And she seems like she's probably gone for good. So we probably never will. I don't know. Also, Pesce, who was with Uryu during this fight, was absolutely hilarious. His ranking of who he thought was strongest among our group based on their appearance felt like it belonged on this channel. So he's like my spirit hollow. He just had so many funny moments throughout this, and is quickly rising in my own ranks as one of my favorite characters, just because of how much he makes me smile. And his infinite slick, that actually isn't infinite but runs out. Come on. It was so good. Love him. The highlight of Chad's fight was getting to see the evolution of his arm, or in this case, his arms. The kind of big shield of his right arm and then the Diablo power of his left. I absolutely love this panel of his punch creating craters that look like a skull. That has got to be one of the most metal images in the series so far. The battle itself is probably the least interesting of the three and is mostly used to showcase Chad's growth, which is definitely fine and in some ways needed. It just lacked the kind of fun of the other two fights because it didn't have characters like Dordoni, Nell, or Pesce in the mix. Maybe if Chad had Dondo Chaka with him, but he's too busy bothering Renji right now, so it lacked a bit of the fun that I was having with the other fights. The real biggest part of Chad's fight came at the very end, when we got to see the Espada Neutra in action for the first time, although he really doesn't have to do much. So far, we've only seen him at the meeting and briefly talking to Ukiura in the hall. Skulking around, by the way, just like I figured he would be that kind of character. And I feel like I'm kind of right about him. He's I don't know, he seems very skulky. But here he shows up and immediately makes it apparent how powerful he is. These big power boosts we've just seen Chad go through literally make no difference. he gets beaten in seconds. And this also gives us a chance to see a bit more of Neutra's character here, where he's clearly very prideful. He doesn't like his subordinates getting in the way, even to protect him, because he doesn't think he needs protection from anyone. And he might not. He views others as gnats to be squashed, and claims to be the Espada's best. Is this confirmation that he's the #1 ranked Espada? I don't think so. I don't think Kubo would reveal it like this, and I think it's similar to what Tywin Lannister said about kings on Game of Thrones. An Espada that needs to say, "I'm the best," is not the best. Someone with real power doesn't need to boast about it. This just seems insecure. Anyway, this series of fights with the former Espada members felt like the opening act of a concert. Like I'm reading going, this is good, I'm enjoying this, I'm having a good time, but this isn't the band that I came to see. But Kubo works that stalled anticipation to his advantage. It's what made it more clear that we might not be ready to dive headfirst into a battle with the Espada. And that was made very apparent by Chad standing no chance. And now we'll see if Rukia can do any better. Next time. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Really excited for what's coming next. Looks like we're finally getting into fights with the Espada. So I'll see you next episode where we get into it. Take care.